By now, you may or may not be familiar with NAV Canada's collaborative flight planning services, but we're going to run through that really quick here today. This is a portal where you'll find flight plan information, including weather and NOTAMs. To find this, you'll go to plan.navcanada.ca, and there you can create your own user and login information. Once you are in, you will find yourself at this welcome page. From here, you'll get a series of notices. These are notices that are applicable to you at any one time that are pertinent, and also some pinned data that is quick reference related. For example, one of the more beneficial documents on here will be the CFPS weather quick reference guide. That'll help you in decoding the information you can find in here and figure out what type of products are also available to you outside of the discussion today. Additionally, you can find local area weather manuals that describe weather or predominant weather in certain regions of Canada, and that can also be very helpful to you. Furthermore, within the links, there are access to Canadian weather cameras, the live runway visual range function, which gives you the runway visual range in feet, which is it's more applicable to the IFR environment. However, it does have the function of providing you with live winds, including gusts, and that can give you headwind, tailwind, as well as crosswind component information. Furthermore, there's circular and AIP supplements that are all pre-flight related. So basically data that is connected to the cars, and you can find supplements there and things that have amended that. Furthermore, you'll find airport diagrams, other NAV Canada notices, as well as access to American weather, as well as American weather cameras, and a sunrise and sunset calculator through the Government of Canada, where you essentially pick what you would like to calculate, sunrise or sunset or twilight, and where you would like to select that for, and based on what date. That's particularly important when it comes to you as a day VFR pilot, and will also be applicable when you are pursuing your night rating, as you will only log time in the night environment, so you'll need to know what time it is legally night. Back at the welcome page at the top, you have flight plans, flight templates, and weather and NOTAM. We're going to go ahead and click on weather and NOTAM, and from here we can see the search function. Now at the top left, we can select our aerodromes, airports, flight information region, or NavAid. So airport and aerodrome is relatively self-explanatory. You'd put in your four-letter identifier for your airport, provided of course that it has observations. You can also go ahead and search for flight information regions. For example, the Edmonton flight information region. Let's see if that's CZEG. There we go, the Edmonton Flight Information Region. We can find all kinds of data within there. That is a massive region, so we're gonna keep this a little bit more localized, just at the Calgary Springbank and Calgary International. But it's just to highlight how large of an area you can search and how wide your search criteria can be. If you're on a route, you could pick the route radius in nautical miles, so it'll basically predict your route that you'll be flying, and then give you a distance left or right of that track for where you want to find information for. I like to ensure that the show duplicates box is not clicked. That reduces the amount of duplicate information that I go through, and this is particularly true when it comes to the NOTAM file, whether it be local or national. We're going to go ahead and select SIGMET and AirMet. Those are the significant meteorological events and anything that's basically not forecast for you. NOTAMs, notice to airmen. For this, I'm going to turn this off. We're going to do NOTAMs in a separate video, so let's turn that off for simplicity and brevity's sake. For the METAR and TAF, I'm going to go ahead and select 1 hour worth. You could go ahead and select the most recent. You could select 1 hour previous plus your most recent, so that'll give you 2, or you can go up to 6 hours. We do that to look at observations and then measure them against the TAF, or the terminal area forecast, which allows us to understand whether or not the trends that we're seeing in the observation are in line with what has been forecast. PIREPs, pilot reports. This is the system where pilots can report their flight conditions to air traffic control or flight services, and they can have that communicated out to other pilots. It's important to understand that PIREPs are subjective to the aircraft and the pilot. So what you may experience will be different to another pilot who may experience the same thing. That'll apply to the aircraft as well. For instance, severe turbulence in a general aviation, light single-engine aircraft may only be moderate to, say, a 737 or larger type aircraft. Upper level winds, we're going to go ahead and pick upper level winds here. This will be a graphical product that we're going to see, and I'll show that to you in a little bit. But remember that this one is the graphical product, and we're going to use another upper level wind product that's in written form when it comes to our flight planning, and I'll show you that here in a little bit as well. Surface analysis, let's get that as well. We're going to search that one so we can see what the pressure systems are all doing. As for radar, we're going to go with the regional ecotop, the regional rain, as well as snow data. This is going to give us a mosaic image of all of the weather radars in the prairies so that we can better understand what weather is happening. Satellite images, I'm going to go ahead and select both infrared and visible. Infrared is going to essentially give us a return image on the energy that's in the atmosphere, whereas the visible is more or less a digital photo from a satellite. This is important because at night, the visible image won't render anything. So we'll generally reference infrared at night, but I like to do both. It's kind of an interesting view, especially while you're learning. A little further down, graphical forecast, we're going to go ahead and pick the clouds and weather, as well as icing, turbulence, and freezing level graphic area forecast, or GFAs, which are covered in another video as well. And as mentioned previously, for the upper level winds, we're going to go ahead and grab the 6,000 and 9,000 foot winds. Some people may ask why I don't click the 3,000, and it's very simple. Springbank and Calgary that we're searching for here, both of their aerodrome elevations are above 3,000 feet. Therefore, there's no upper level wind at 3,000 feet because that's above sea level. 3,000 feet would be in the ground, and we just don't have that. Furthermore, even if we were going somewhere that's a little bit below 3,000 feet or closer to 3,000 feet, I would likely not select that because that is quite low, and 6,000 to 9,000 would be more in line with our direction of flight if we were flying out of Calgary. Once we've got all that selected, we're going to click search, and all that data will be shown on the right hand side, starting with our composite radar. You can see here along the left hand side of the image, that is the Rocky Mountains, so basically the border of Alberta and British Columbia. Along the south, this green line be the US-Canadian border. So we can now see that there's Alberta, Saskatchewan, and now into Manitoba. Looking at this ecotop, this is showing us the cloud heights. So we do see throughout southern Saskatchewan some isolated cloud. Looks like the tops are somewhere, if we look at the legend at the top, and the yellow 9.8, so 9,800 feet or so, so nearly 10,000 foot tops, but quite isolated in there. But generally looks to be fairly clear over the prairies right now, which is a little bit different. Earlier on in the day, there was some snow that went through there, and we can actually look at the historical data. And if we go back about an hour before, you can actually see there was a lot more cloud. We can go through and play that through, and we can see that the cloud has been dissipating there. But generally, if we look over Alberta, there's nothing really of interest for us. Occasionally on this, you will see clutter through here. It's there almost every single day, and it's just a function of reflections off of the mountains. So you have to be mindful of that when you're looking at radar. A little further down, this is the composite radar again, but this is showing the rain. Again, in those areas of cloud in Saskatchewan, just some specks there, which may very well have some light rain in there. But over Alberta that we're concerned with, absolutely nothing of interest there. It's a very clear day here today. This is the composite radar for snow. So this is taking it's basically reflecting off of snow that's up in the clouds. You can see again that area in southern Saskatchewan, a little bit more reflectivity there happening. If we go back a little bit, it's a little bit brighter. So it looks to me like it was probably snowing there in the last couple of hours. But again, in the Alberta context, nothing of interest for us. Scrolling a little further down, we do have into our Springbank weather, we have a PIREP here. This is telling us a PIREP over Springbank at 1950. It's almost a couple hours old. At 6,000 feet, a 172 reported turbulence light to moderate below 6,000 feet. That was continuous. And that was on there routing between Springbank, red deer, and so it's probably fair to say that even though it's a nice day out, it's a little bit breezy, that's probably just some mechanical turbulence that they were getting there, maybe some convective as well. We'll keep going through here. We have our METARs. We do have both of these METARs we looked for 1 hour worth. So 2100, that was issued about 15 minutes ago. And then this will cover the hour previous. So between the two, we should see that the trends are relatively consistent. You can see there's this north wind that may have been contributing to the bumps that we got in that pilot report above. We can see the winds were a little bit variable. Because this is an auto-generated report, the maximum visibility that's reported is 9 miles, and that's been consistent over the last hour. Sky was clear, beautiful spring day here. Temperature pretty consistent. It's probably the warmest it's going to get today at about 14 degrees. So it has been warming, which tells me that PIREP earlier with the bumps may have been convective related. The altimeter setting is pretty consistent at 3026, so probably not a lot moving through here, and that would be in line with what we have seen in the radar as well. Below we see the terminal area forecast for Springbank. It's pretty close. It's not too bad. So between 1800 Zulu and 04 Zulu, the winds are sort of out of north, true at 5 knots, greater than 6 statute miles visibility, and clear skies. So that's pretty close. And then even from 1800 Zulu to 2000 Zulu, the winds were more north-northeast at 10 knots. So the one thing that I draw from this is the comparison that our winds that have actually occurred in the METAR are a little bit higher than what is forecast. And of course that PIREP with the mechanical turbulence and the convective turbulence sort of supports that. So the TAF's pretty good. It's giving us good weather, but the winds may be a little bit different than our forecast. Down here through the graphic area forecast, this comes in a series of charts that are 6 hours apart. This one is for 1800 Zulu. Right now it is 2116, so this is a little bit old. This was what was forecast for a few hours ago. We can click the midnight Zulu, and we can actually see that the difference in southern Alberta is pretty minor. Far southern Alberta, around midnight Zulu, there'll be some isolated towering cumulus up to 14,000 feet with some light rain showers. But for us here in the Calgary Springbank area, it doesn't look like too much between now and then. Even if we go forward another 6 hours, still very few clouds between 8,000 and 10,000 feet in southern Alberta, but nothing really of interest in the Calgary Springbank area. Now those charts come as a pair when set of another 3 charts for icing, turbulence, and freezing level. So throughout this chart, again, it's the same time frame. This one is older. Now we'll look ahead a little bit at the midnight Zulu. And as we look at that, we can see that still nothing really significant over Alberta insofar as icing or turbulence. If we look into Saskatchewan and Manitoba, this blue hatched area, that's sort of in line with what we were seeing earlier with the snow and everything moving through. So they still are getting some cloud, and my guess is this is all icing in cloud that they're getting there. This looks to be like mixed icing in through most of this area, between 10 and 14,000 feet, between 3 and 6,000. So there is some cloud that's giving icing. If you were flying into Manitoba and you were a high flyer and you were descending down in there, you'd probably pick up some ice on the descent. That's my takeaway from that. If we look a little further, 06. Sort of the same story there for Manitoba. A little bit of change with the freezing level, but that's to be expected at night. Scrolling down a little bit, let's look at the low-level 6,000 foot winds for Western Canada. You'll see all these red lines on there. Those are known as isotachs. Those are showing us the direction of the wind. And the number of ticks or feathers on the tail of the arrow is going to tell us how fast that wind is going. So a small tick is worth 5 knots and a large tick would be worth 10 knots. You can see here, basically we're looking at probably light winds in the 5 to 10 range out of the north around Calgary. If we look at the 9,000 foot winds, it's kind of the same story out of the northeast, about probably 10 to 15 knots or so out of the northeast. But it's important as you look at this gives you a generalized impression of the direction of the winds. So I could say things in general like north-northeast or out of the north, but I don't get a specific direction and magnitude. And that's what our written form for upper level winds will be, and we'll touch on that in a little bit here. This is our infrared satellite image. You can tell that it's fairly dark over Alberta, and that tells me there's not a lot reflecting energy back. Of course, if we look over into Saskatchewan and Manitoba, we see all that extensive cloud cover we talked about. This would be the same cloud cover that's giving them all that icing there that we just looked at, and some of that snow and precipitation that went through there earlier. But again, Alberta generally pretty clear. So this is the infrared version of that. This is also the infrared for Western Canada. It also gives us part of the Midwest of the United States. And then we have another one that will come to us that is still from the same GOES West satellite, the infrared image, and this is a larger image. It goes all the way down to Mexico and shows us all the United States and Canada, almost up to Greenland there. So again, beautiful day over Alberta to go flying. Now, this is a visible BC interior shot. This will show you Vancouver Island. This one's always sort of included and attached with this. If we scroll down a little bit more, we're going to get Western Canada, and you can see some slight differences between the visible and the infrared. Remember, infrared is giving you energy return, and this is giving you what it sees. So this is more of a digital, imagine a digital camera shot of what's happening with the weather. So there is some items to see, but a lot of this can also be topography and geography related. For instance, all of this in here, this is all mountain range, right? It's all snow capped on the mountains. So you have to look at it and be able to interpret geography as well. But again, still a very clear day over top of Alberta. Scrolling down a little further, it zooms out once again. We have the Midwest of the United States. We still see that large system that has moved, it's all through the United States, up through Saskatchewan and over into Manitoba, that was giving us that icing that we would probably see for the next few hours. And again, on the visible, it looks slightly different on the infrared, but nonetheless, they still sort of give you the same impression of the extent of that weather. You'll also have another visible image zoomed further out. Again, this is almost up to Greenland here to the top right corner, and then all the way down to Mexico and along the whole coast of Canada to the Yukon and Alaska. Scrolling a little further down, we get to our surface analysis chart. This one at a glance looks terrifying, but I promise you it's not that bad. At the top here, we do have, this would be the North Pole. These are all lines of latitude up here. So the North Pole is up here in the top. And if we bring ourselves south, we can see the familiar shape of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba in here. So that's the area that we're predominantly concerned with. One thing that's important to remember is that analysis charts are observations. This is what has actually happened. So this is not a forecast, this is an actual analysis. The next chart will bring in a little more zoomed in view, which is a little bit more recognizable. You can see the high pressure areas here. This one working in our favor here in Alberta, keeping things nice and clear. This one brought the high pressure ridge through Saskatchewan and Manitoba that brought some instability there, obviously with some snow. On these, you can also see the fronts. You see some stationary fronts here. There's a warm front, trough warm air aloft over to the far north up in the territories. East coast of the United States, another trough, cold fronts and warm fronts around a low in here. And so you can get quite a bit of detail just at a glance of what's happening with the weather there if you have a good foundational understanding of all the theory we've given you up until this point. One big takeaway here is the isobars, all of the lines that are connecting areas of equal pressure. You will recall that when isobars are close together, that is when it gets windy. So you can see here in Alberta, there's an isobar right about here, and the next isobar is down well to the south. So they're fairly far apart when compared to, say, up by Greenland, where we have these isobars quite close together, and that's going to probably bring some fairly decent wind up in that area. We also selected Calgary information, so as we go down, it's the same METAR for Calgary and the TAF for Calgary. As we look at that, we're again looking for a comparison trend between the observations and the TAF, and this one also looks fairly consistent. The winds sort of out of the north-northeast there at 10 to 20, it looks like, between these two. A little bit variable, but that's all right. We do have a visibility that's greater than the 9 miles in the Springbank observation, because that Springbank observation is auto and 9 miles is the highest it gets. Calgary being human observed will give us 35 miles and 40 miles, so that's more of realistic, real world impression of what the visibility is. A few clouds, 10,000, temperature warming up a little bit, altimeter is consistent. Again, it's a beautiful spring day with a little bit of wind out of the north there, up to 20 knots it looks like right here. That seems to be somewhat in line with the terminal area forecast. Again, I would say as far as the weather goes, it's pretty consistent. The only exception being the wind. I think we're seeing a little bit higher wind than was forecast, but that's nothing out of the ordinary for this part of the world, and it wouldn't particularly stop me from going flying. The upper wind data, we're going to talk about this again in its own video, but this is the written format for upper level winds. You'll see 3,000 feet, there is no forecast. That's just a function of Calgary being above 3,000 feet elevation. Again, we're going to talk about these in more detail, but you can see that these have much more exacting values for direction, speed, and temperature, as opposed to the ones with the ice attack showing us the actual winds in that graphical product. And so you're going to use this one predominantly when doing your flight planning on your flight planning worksheet. So that's been a look at the Collaborative Flight Planning Service. It would be best for you to go through and play with this and use this as a venue to go and practice interpreting the weather that you're getting. At a certain point, it may come a time where you're not entirely sure what it is you're reading, and it's completely within your bounds to get an interpretive weather briefing or to access the PATWAS service, and we'll talk about those in another video.